Joon Lee wrote a great article for Yahoo inside the absolute S show that led to the Boston Red Sox trade of Rafael Devers. Joon is a journalist who has written for ESPN, The Washington Post, Bleacher Report, Yahoo Sports. Joon, hello.
Good morning, guys. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for joining us. I very much enjoyed your article. There seems to be a lot of people locally trying to justify this through their writing, but you kind of got an inside look on the dysfunction of this team. Tell us what you found.
Well, I think, Fred, the point that you just made about the vocabulary that those guys were using, it kind of embodies the shift that we've seen at Fenway Park over the course of the last 10 years, where yesterday there was so much jargon, and it kind of speaks to this like Wall Street culture that's really emerging over at Fenway Park. This was a shift that, John Henry really wanted with Chaim Bloom, but I think it's really gone into full force under Craig Breslow. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing is this kind of lack of communication. And this is a sentiment that we've seen across baseball when I talk to people around Major League Baseball, that the Red Sox are kind of in a spot where they don't really know how to communicate well with not just like people within their own organization, but with other teams around the sport. There was a lot of conversation about how the Red Sox want to become the Los Angeles Dodgers. They want to build this like quote unquote sustainable organization, which has become kind of a meaningless buzzword at this point. And I think that we've kind of gotten to the point with the Red Sox too, where they have just struggled to communicate. And I think we've seen that with Rafael Devers. I mean, that's kind of been at the center of all of this.
Okay, so the way it sounds to me is like ownership is in with management. Management is kind of installing this quote-unquote Wall Street culture. But that information getting to the players and the manager, there's a loss there because obviously there's a disconnect when it comes to playing these kids. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yes. I mean, I think that Alex Cora, we've seen, he's wanted to win now, and he's complained about it in public to the media for years. I mean, it's one of those things where the Red Sox are constantly talking about building a sustainable winner, but when are they trying to actually win and go all in? They say that, that they think that they can win more games now that Rafael Devers isn't with the team, but I mean, Devers is one of the 10 best hitters in baseball. That's not a guy you can just replace. It's not the same thing as the Nomar trade back in 2004 when Nomar wasn't really good anymore, even though he was still a fan favorite. So there's kind of a disconnect right now, I think, between the front office, and most importantly, the coaching staff, where their idea of what it means to win now doesn't actually look the same.
You were talking about disconnect between Breslow and Cora. One thing I really found fascinating in your piece is the disconnect between Breslow and his own people. I think the word you used was he's insulated himself.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Red Sox, I think, more than most organizations, have had people working in that front office dating back almost 20 years, dating back to the Theo Epstein era. And that sort of organizational consistency, people being there for such a long time, and having the institutional knowledge of how this team has worked for such a long time, I think is a little bit different than what happened with Moneyball, where you have this like old group of scouts who are complaining at Billy Beane. These are people who are willing to adjust and have adjusted over the years to the different styles of operating a baseball team. But what has happened is, Breslow has basically looked at that group of people and decided this isn't done the way that it's supposed to be done in baseball today, and locked them all out. And, part of me is like a little shocked that, all of this information is even coming out to me because, the fact that the information about a scout getting fired because of a Zoom hot mic.
Yeah, tell that story. That's a great story. All right, so there is a Zoom meeting between the front office, right? And tell us what happened.
So basically, there's a Zoom meeting that's filled with people from across the organization. Breslow is giving information. The Zoom meeting ends, and on a hot mic, a scouting coordinator, his name is Carl Moshe. He'd been with the Red Sox since 2017. He says under his breath, "Thank you, Brez, you effing stiff." And that goes out across the entire organization. This happened about a month ago. And Breslow, as a result of that going out there, decided to fire Moshe. Now, it's interesting because Moshe's sentiment is kind of reflected across most of the front office right now. And so the fact that this got out there, is kind of an embodiment of how much chaos is going on in the front office. The fact that, this is a sentiment that not only happened in a Zoom meeting, but got out to the public, got to me as a reporter, I think speaks to the level of chaos that is going on and the level of disagreement that's going on, between Breslow and the rest of the front office. Like, you often have to think, like, I often think as a reporter, like, why is this information even getting to me in the first place? The fact that someone is willing to tell me this piece of information, wants it published, basically, wants people in Boston to know this information, I think speaks to how much people within the Red Sox organization who have been there for years and years and years understand how the media works, understand how this market works, understand the urgency that fans feel to win, especially after the last 5 years post-Mookie trade, I think speaks to the level of chaos and dysfunction that we're seeing within the Red Sox front office right now.
Now, how was it described? So Breslow just fired the guy for saying that? Like, it would almost seem that even if I wanted to fire the guy for other reasons, him saying that would make me not fire him because I wouldn't want people to think I couldn't take that kind of criticism.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how information gets to you, is petty moves like that. Like, someone calls you an effing stiff and you can't take it. Good luck. See, you can be as smart as you want to be, but part of being good at something is being able to communicate to others your plan. And if you can't take any kind of feedback and you can't communicate your wants to other people, you're useless.
And also for that guy specifically, June, I would think if Breslow had handled that better, he would have said, all right, you said that, but now I effing own you. And now, I've got one. I've got one on you. I'm gonna let this go. But here's how I'm going to utilize this to my advantage, and hopefully get him on board eventually. But that's a guy that you don't necessarily have to dismiss right away. You can use that to your advantage.
I don't know. Guy calls me an effing stiff. I'm not. I don't. What do I care? Don't you have kids? I mean, everyone's constantly insulting me. That would be like the least insulting thing someone had said to me on most days. But that's the kind of thing that gets people talking to the media. That's bad management. Do you understand? That's why Joon Lee's got this story. It's because people see that, and it's such Bush League nonsense that's what gets this stuff into the ether, which is part of your job, is keeping things in-house, and you keep things in-house by not alienating everyone around you. But that sounds like kind of what's going on. What is the feeling of how Rafael Devers was treated? Because there's a lot being made of this. Different camps. A lot of people think, obviously, that he was not a company man. Other people think that the organization messed it up. What's the feeling in that in-house?
I mean, I don't really think that Devers handled the situation as well as he could have. At the same time, Hardy, I think you're spot on. Like, it's one of those situations where, I think a more experienced manager, someone who has been able to work with people for a long time, probably handles it more similarly to what you said. But I think we're in a position where, this is a guy who's trying to establish his authority within the organization. There's been people there working there for 20 years that people have more trust with. And this is a guy who, wasn't the first or second candidate that the team wanted. This is someone who was kind of a tertiary candidate that the Red Sox ended up hiring. So I think this is someone who really wants to make his stamp on the organization. And so, I think it kind of mirrors what happens with Rafi, where, there was a lack of communication for the entire offseason. Breslow himself admitted it in the press conference yesterday, where he's kind of reflecting and looking back at how things could have been better. But that lack of communication from the get-go, where he's basically saying, like, you're the third baseman for the entire offseason, and then he has to get convinced by Alex Cora to sign Alex Bregman to be pushed over the edge to try to go in on this season. And at that point, Devers is pissed off because he's like, wait a minute, you guys told me that I was going to be the third baseman this entire offseason. Did Devers handle the situation as well as he could have? Absolutely not. But this was a situation that could have been prevented in the first place by just communicating and being upfront with the player at the beginning of the situation. So I think that, like, the situation with Carl Moshe, like, I understand to some degree that, like, calling your boss an effing stiff, that's probably something that you, like, don't want to happen. At the same time, there's a way to, like, confront that someone and also understand, like, hey, maybe this is a situation where if someone's willing to say this, even on, like, a just ending Zoom call, there might be other issues within the organization right now. And so, trying to just fire that guy, I think, also aligns with the lack of communication we're seeing where, if someone was just a little bit more upfront, was just made themselves a little bit more vulnerable, not just even in public, but with their own employees, the situation lands completely differently with everyone involved.
Well, how much of an issue was Devers in the clubhouse? And, we got a report yesterday that, there was kind of like a sigh of relief among some people in the front office because he had become such a problem to deal with, whether it was with the media or other obligations that he had for the team.
They don't. John Henry never talks to the media. They had to go out to the West Coast to talk to the media. That's the stupidest thing.
Other people are expected to, and it hardly matters for winning or losing, but the clubhouse issue could be. I'm trying to see if there's any validity to that notion that Devers had become a problem.
From my understanding, this was more of a clubhouse issue that reflected poorly on the front office than it did, upon other teammates. I think other teammates, to some degree, understood why Rafael was so frustrated with the situation because of the lack of communication. I talked with a Red Sox player a couple weeks back for a story that was completely unrelated to the Devers situation. I just asked him what was going on, and he said, we're not really thinking about it because it's just day-to-day stuff. And, Rafi's not complaining about it to the rest of the clubhouse. Like all of the stuff, it was more of an attitude thing. Like it's just the vibe that he's carrying on a day-to-day basis. But I think that there was enough veteran leadership in this particular Red Sox clubhouse where, they weren't necessarily thinking about it. It wasn't really a concern to them, especially as they were kind of trying to figure out, can we get back to 500? And especially after the weekend, the vibe was, we're on a good place right now. We're going to keep winning. And it seemed like, 2 hours before the trade, Rafi had basically been I'm moving on. This is a situation that in his mind was kind of over. And so it was interesting that the moment where it felt like things were basically starting to move on for the fan base and for the players in that clubhouse, this is the situation that kind of blows up in their face. And I think it also kind of shows this lack of feel that Craig Breslow has, not just reading the clubhouse, but also the fan base and understanding the situation has kind of moved on. You didn't really need to do this in this moment.
Yeah, but when you're going to fail giving up all, fail when you're saving your boss hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
That'll be the saving grace, because I would think most organizations, when your guy mishandles your best player like this, that's a huge black mark against him. But I think saving all that money will put him in John Henry's good grace.
Are you under the assumption that Henry cares about winning anymore, or has it just become like a line item on a balance sheet?
I think Henry thinks he probably still cares about winning, but he doesn't have the sense of urgency that he did before. Remember, when they went out and got Adrian Gonzalez and Carl Crawford just because the Nesson ratings had gone down, that John Henry is gone now because his major focus is trying to globe Fenway Sports Group globally. He wants to become, the basically prime example of this next generation of sports owners, of having these global sports conglomerates and trying to outpace the private equity money that's coming to the sport. And unfortunately, the private equity money is coming into Boston, beyond Fenway Park. FSG has its own private equity group, but the Celtics, the Sixth Street ownership private equity group came in and bought a pretty significant chunk of that team. That money is going to start coming into sports over the course of the next 10 years. And the main reason is because all these sports owners see this massive opportunity to grow these sports teams around the world. John Henry's already doing that with Liverpool. He has a major brand in the Red Sox. That is his main focus. And that's the major conversation that I hear across sports owners, across all sports, is that, they're trying to have as much cash as possible because they need the cash in order to be able to find new fans around the world, because that is the major investment point that these owners see in order to continue growing the valuations of these franchises over the course of the next 2 decades.
And then you can die. That's it. You keep growing and then you die.
Fred,
and then you die a happy man.
Fred, it's a wonderful life.
I mean, you own the Red Sox. I would think that would be, in and of itself, the achievement. But no, the achievement is until you are a very, very old man to keep acquiring global assets until you die.
Yeah, so money's still coming in. Great.
Yeah, it's enough.
Yeah,
it's enough. All right. Well, June, it's not even about sports anymore. It's just sport is the money maker.
That's what June was saying. Yeah.
Well, that's what June says. That's what Breer says. These owners, they're operating. We're all fools. Bonds in a game, my friend. June Lee, you're very introspective. You got us thinking on a philosophical level.
Man,
he's a Brookline guy. Brookline High.
Believe me, Adam told me all about it. Adam told. There's
Brookline
nothing more.
High School.
By the way, there's nothing more fraudulent than a Ivy League athlete They get all the panache of the academic credibility of an Ivy League institution, but they really didn't deserve it.
Toucher, I will say that all the Brookline bits that you've done over the years totally deserved.
I lived there. I hated it. Oh, did I hate it? I absolutely hated it. It's the worst place I've ever lived.
He'll never go to Tappan Street again.
No,
Never.
well, every time the train goes by Brookfield or whatever the hell it's called, I don't like that.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Red Sox analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.